Oh, look. Snakes, guys. Snakes. Oh, this is like my fourth take of doing this video. But anyway, let's try it this time. We have OGDOADIC, a brand new reptile strategy and the only coherent reptile strategy for about 12 years. It can make use of Snake Rain. It's got a lot of graveyard effects, a lot of cool effects that base on doing things that your opponent based on what your opponent does, similar to what Generator does. But let's not beat around the bush. Let's just go straight into the deck. One copy of OGDOADIC. He's the strongest boss monster in the deck. If it's in the graveyard, you contribute 3 monsters to special summon it. And it can send all other monsters on the field to the graveyard that weren't special summoned from the graveyard as a quick effect. So this is non-targeting removal. It can just send everything. You know, pretty awesome. We have one Aron. So by attributing 2 monsters, you can special summon him. And the same applies to ABHYSS, the queen. Essentially speaking, Aron is your sort of hand control. So if a card is added to your opponent's hand, you can rip a random card out of their hand. And if a card is sent to your opponent's graveyard from their field, you can search any light or dark reptile monster from your deck or graveyard, add it to your hand. ABHYSS, if your opponent special summons a monster from your graveyard, from their graveyard, sorry, or if any monster special summon from their graveyard. So if you steal a monster out of their graveyard, you can proc that effect off. It sends a card they control to the graveyard as well, non-targeting. Very strong removal. She can also revive any of your light or dark reptiles from the graveyard if your opponent sends a card from their hand to the graveyard. So yeah, that's really cool. There's a nice little tech I've played in the deck, which can proc both of these card effects off, and it's just a simple spell card that can be activated during either player's turn. Well, not during either player's turn, but during your turn, which is really awesome. 2 copies of Curse. Can be special summoned from the graveyard by tributing 1 monster on your field, and on special summon can bring back a level 4 or lower OGDOADIC monster from your graveyard. However, it gets banished when it leaves the field. Very nice recursion. 2400 defense, which is really cool. 1 Elliot. Some people are playing 2 if you're going with something like trading, but I've only gone for the 1. If you can also special summon it by tributing a monster. And if it's special summoned, you can target 2 monsters in your banished, including a reptile, and return them to the graveyard. So nice little bit of recursion, but again, this one I wouldn't max out too much on, I don't think. Is a good card though, and it can help proc the effects of your Aron. We've got Triple Naoya. It can pitch itself almost like Tri-Brigade Fractal to send a light reptile from your deck to the graveyard, and on normal or special summon can search a OGDOADIC spell or trap. 3 Nunu. Can bring itself back from the graveyard if you control no monsters or an OGDOADIC monster, and similar to Naoya, it can pitch itself from the hand to send a dark reptile from your deck to the graveyard. So they send the opposite attributes. 3 copies of Zohar. So basically, if it is sent from the field to the graveyard, or if it's special summoned from the graveyard, you can have both players draw a card. Sorry, I think I got that completely wrong. No, sorry. I thought it was both players. No, just your opponent draws a card. Then you get to search for a reptile. Then both players send a card from their hand to the graveyard, which is, you know, pretty good. Your opponent gets the draw, you get the search, and then it can do that. There's also 1 copy of Flogos. So these guys both have the same effect, that can bring themselves from the graveyard back to the hand by sending a card from your hand to the graveyard, which is cool. Flogos is a bit different. You need to have your opponent have 1 monster in their graveyard and 1 monster in their field. So you target the monster on their field and the monster with a equal or higher attack in the graveyard. You reborn the monster from the graveyard to their field and then send the other monster from the field to the graveyard. This can help trigger a lot of other effects on your field, but again, it's it's probably not worth running too many of this unless there's a silly combo that I don't know about. 2 copies of Light Serpent. This guy can special summon itself if it's sent from the hand to the graveyard. Can trigger off of being sent with these guys, which is really cool, off of Snake Rain, just a load of other stuff, and it's a nice level 3 to have if you want to go into, if I want to go into Gossip Shadow. Danger Tsuchinoko, the nice little reptile, can special summon itself from the graveyard or from hand. 1 oddball, the Perform Age Trick Clown. He's never really going to stay in the graveyard, so it's nice to just have him there to trigger, because you're able to send a lot of cards from your hand to a graveyard as well, which is really cool. 3 copies of Water Lily. It's a Foolish Burial for reptiles, and if you have 5 reptiles in your graveyard with different names, you can special summon a reptile from your graveyard, which is awesome and it's searchable. 3 copies of the infamous Snake Rain. By discarding a card, you can send 4 reptile monsters from your deck to the graveyard. It's a quad Foolish Burial. Really good. Now here's the card I was talking about. I'm testing it at the moment. It's Dragged Down into the Grave. So you can pick what card you send from your opponent's hand to the graveyard. So cards like Aminessa and I think Aron that trigger only if a monster is sent from your opponent's, well, different areas to the graveyard, can trigger this. So both, at least one of each of their effects can be triggered off of 1 activation of Drag Down into the Grave, which is really cool. So if you have both of them on the field, well, you're going to get a lot of stuff, because you activate Drag Down into the Grave with Aaron on the field. You get to pick a card out of their hand to get rid of. They draw a random card, and then they randomly discard another card, which is awesome, I think, anyway. So the chances of that card they drew being worth more than the cards you took out of their hand is unlikely. So yeah, I like it. I like the tech. Double Viper's Rebirth, because it's a monster reborn for reptiles. It only lasts for a turn, but I like the card. 1 Monster Reborn as a sort of 3rd copy, but I didn't want to run 3 Viper's Rebirth because it's not really worth it. 1 copy of Calling, special summons 2 OGDOADIC tokens. The second effect will never come up really, but you need 8 OGDOADICs with different names in your graveyard to bring any 2 reptiles out of the graveyard. Now, OGDOADIC Hollow is an interesting one. So during the main phase, you contribute any reptile effect monster to target any monster in your opponent's graveyard and special summon it to your field. However, if it gets sent to the graveyard, all face-up non-reptile monsters you control to the graveyard, get sent to the graveyard. And the monster you stole gets sent to the graveyard during the end phase. This can trigger the effect of Amnesia and bring an additional reptile out of your graveyard during your opponent's turn to wall up even more. Some more control cards. I've got Double Solemn Judgment, Double Crackdown, and Double Solemn Strike. I don't really do control-based strategies on this channel, and it's nice to sort of do control, because, you know, everyone's always talking about combo and how ridiculous it is, but I like a control strategy, like the best of them. Now for extra deck, there are a few cards which I could have, but I don't. But let's talk about Reptilian Echidna. It's pretty staple, can reduce your opponent's monster to 0. There are the Topologic cards, because you'll be able to sometimes revive monsters in your opponent's turn and trigger them. Phoenix, Almirage for any of those weird normal summons, which is pretty cool. We've got Equimax, we've got Gossip Shadow, we've got 2 King of the Feral Imps, we've got 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 Tornado Dragon, 1 Baguska, 1 Hope Harbinger, 1 Overlord, and 1 Dingirsu. Again, the Feral Imps can search any reptile, which is awesome. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this upload. It's a little bit different today, and I apologize if I messed up a few of the card effects. This deck does still need quite a bit of practice from me, as I haven't had the chance to sit down much recently. But thanks for watching, and I hopefully will see you guys in the next video. Peace.